I've been storing food for over 40 years, and I've pretty much perfected that process. Today, I want to share with you the tips and tricks that I have learned that will simplify food storage for you so that you can have what you need to keep your family fed no matter what happens. The world has gone crazy. Everywhere we look, there are natural disasters, economic challenges, and unknown futures. The good news is that one of the best things that we can do to mitigate against that risk is to have a prepper pantry, to have a food supply so that no matter what happens, we've got food that we can feed our family. Now in today's video, I'm going to teach you exactly how to do that. It's not complicated, it's not expensive, and it's not time consuming. This is something you can start today. The foundation of your food supply should be shelf-stable goods. Now you can store these anywhere that you want. I happen to have a cool, dry, dark basement storeroom, but they will store just fine in your house, in a closet, in a bedroom, or even under a bed. Just find a place where you can organize it, know what's there, and use it and rotate it, because that's what's really important. I think that the best food storage is that is always rotated through. You want to only store things that you'll eat. A lot of food, all you need to do is buy it and store it. It doesn't even have to be repackaged. Now let's talk about this. Like, this is a box of cookies from Costco. And this package is a little bit puffy, and that's because they've used MAP when they manufactured it, which is modified atmospheric packaging. That means they've either nitrogen flushed it or there's some combination of gases that's best for the product in here that's going to help it store the longest. So repackaging these doesn't make any sense at all. Leave them in the original packaging and keep them cool, dry, and dark. Now, you can tell that they've used MAP if the package is kind of puffy, right? That means that it's got something in it that's protecting the food. That's a really good thing. Now, if you look at these beans, this doesn't have it. The package isn't fluffy. You can see that there's a little bit of air exchange in here. So while these beans are going to be fine on your shelf for a year, they don't have the same protection that some of these have. So when I purchase food, a lot of it, I'm just purchasing it and leaving it on my shelf. Now, I've got different ways of storing it. So we eat a lot of nuts and seeds, and this is the way that I store these. This is up on a shelf, and sometimes you need secondary packaging. Our storage room has a little bit of a high moisture issue, and so we want to make sure that we mitigate for that. And this is one of the ways that I do it. If you happen to get a mouse, this is going to provide some protection. It's not, if you've got an infestation, it's not going to protect everything, but this is just another layer. And so this is the way that I like to do it. Now, you'll see that I buy the nuts and the seeds, and I will put the date, the best if used by date on it. Now, that doesn't mean they go bad. Like, these can be good a long time after that, but my target is to have 1 year of everything that I need in storage. And so this is the way I accomplish it with nuts and seeds. Because all of these packages, they're puffy, right? That means that the manufacturer has put them in a special atmosphere that's going to keep them fresh as long as possible, because they want it to stay on the shelf for a long time and not have loss. Now, if I buy my seeds or my nuts in bulk, like at Winco, I will put them inside of a mason jar and I will vacuum seal it. Depending on what it is, I might also use an oxygen absorber, and we'll talk about that in a minute. One of the things that I really like about keeping it in the tote is that I can see exactly what's in here. I know when I'm getting short on something, and so I'm okay with the clear box. If you are storing this where it's light all the time, like in this room, if you store it in a dark container, it will protect it from the light, and it will help it to store longer because light degrades food. So there's so many things that you can just go out to the store and buy and leave on your shelf, and you don't have to do anything to them to extend that shelf life. But now let's talk about extending the shelf life and repackaging dry goods for the longest possible shelf life. If you want to go past that year or past that best if used by date, you've got to do a few important things. Now, one of the things you hear a lot about are oxygen absorbers. It's just this little packet that once it's exposed to air, it starts to rust. The iron starts to rust and it absorbs the oxygen that's in the air. Now, it does a few things. By packaging dry goods in a low oxygen environment, you make it so that bugs and some bacteria can't grow. I mean, you just eliminate that, which is really good. If you've ever had an infestation in any of your dry goods, you'll appreciate that. But the other thing that it does is it reduces oxidation, which means that it slows down rancidity and that the quality of your food will remain good longer. These are super, super easy to use. So in each one of them, there is a little indicator inside this bag, and it's pink, and it shows that it's good. If it turns dark blue or purple, that means these have been exposed to oxygen. I like to buy them in these packages of 10 from Pack Fresh USA. Hands down, they are the best oxygen absorbers we've tried. In fact, we did an experiment where I bought a whole bunch of oxygen absorbers and we experimented and pitted them against one another. And so if you click the card in the corner, it'll take you to that video and you can see the experiment for yourself. Anyway, so it comes in a package like this, but I might not use all 10 of these at once. I might only need one. So what I do is I keep a little jar like this. You want it to be as small as possible, so there's this little air in here. And then I take out the one that I'm going to use, and then I always vacuum seal this. So my vacuum sealer is there. 4 Jars has a really cool one too. I put the canning lid on it, then I put this on it. There's a little hose, and it takes me less than 60 seconds to reseal this. What that does is it makes sure that my oxygen absorbers are always fresh. They shouldn't stay out longer than 30 minutes, but they do such amazing things with your food that it's worth buying them. If you go to Pack Fresh USA and use the promo code Provident, it'll give you 10% off. Now let's talk about different ways that we can store these. So if you notice, there's rice in here. When I dump the rice in here, I actually taped the cooking instructions on here. There's an oxygen absorber in the bottom. This jar is repurposed, right? It held either Gatorade or Powerade, I think Powerade. So we had to wash it out really good. And in fact, there's an entire video on how to do this. If you click the card in the corner, it'll take you to it. But I put duct tape around the top just to make sure that this is an airtight seal. And now this has changed what would have been good on the shelf for a year into something that can be good for a lot longer, maybe 20 years or so. And the best jars to use are anything that's held liquid, except for the oil is really hard to get out of, like oil jars. I wouldn't use those. I would pass it up because there's enough soda or juice or Gatorade bottles that you can clean them up really good and use them. The one bad thing about these is that it lets light in, right? And that oxygen can permeate through the walls over time. Well, glass, oxygen can't get through here. So this is even better storage. You still have a problem with light permeation, but this is like an ideal little time capsule other than that, and other than the fact that it can break. So if you're concerned about earthquakes, you might want to think about that. Now, I always use an oxygen absorber in the bottom. And the reason I put it in the bottom and not the top is because sometimes it's harder to stick it in there in the top. So I found better success. And you notice that I did duct tape the top of this seal. Another thing that I'll do is I will put them in little canning jars, like my popcorn. This is a really good amount. And this is mushroom popcorn, good stuff. But this helps so that it'll be okay. I used to think you couldn't use oxygen absorbers in here because you only want to use oxygen absorbers in things that are 10% moisture or less. But when I talked to a food scientist about this, he said that popcorn is just fine, and that is actually the preferred way to do that. Another thing that you can do, like these are beans with oxygen absorber, but you can also vacuum seal this, which is really nice because then you make sure that you've got it sealed. But it's not necessary. If you want to just vacuum seal, you can do that. It will not remove as much oxygen as an oxygen absorber. So that's kind of sad, but it does remove a whole lot of it. So it is an option that you might want to think about. Now for me, one of the ways that I love to store things is in Mylar bags. The jars are really nice because if I'm rotating through and reusing them, I'm wasting nothing except for a little oxygen absorber, and I'm okay with that. Pack Fresh USA has all kinds of sizes, and they have kits that have the right size oxygen absorber in them, which is handy. But this I just did just a couple days ago. So this is how I store my sugar. This is one of the 5-gallon Mylar bags, and I just take the big bag of sugar and I slide it in here. We've got a whole video on that you can go and watch. And then I close this, and then I heat seal it shut. You have to heat seal it shut. Now with sugar and salt, you do not use an oxygen absorber because it will turn them hard. If I were to do flour, I actually do my flour this way too, only I slit a little hole in the flour bag and slide the oxygen absorber in there, tape it shut, and then I slide that entire 25-pound bag of flour inside this, and then I heat seal it shut. I can reuse this several times. Every time it gets a little bit smaller because I have to cut it off, but I think it's nice to reuse anytime we can. This is the sugar bucket that we dump it in. And I think this is funny. I was thinking about this at the beginning of this video. This sugar bucket used to be our timeout bucket, and the kids would have to go into the pantry and sit on the bucket until they could sweeten up and come out. And I was just thinking that, you know, the little girl who used to sit on there and sneak the sugar out of the sugar bucket, she's grown and married now. I mean, this sugar bucket has been around here for a really long time, so we've been doing that for a long time. Now, I love the Gamma Seal lids. There's two ways that you can seal up a bucket, and that is with a regular lid or a Gamma Seal lid. The Gamma Seal lid provides quick access, and so I do like that. I can't tell when somebody's been into that bucket though with the Gamma Seal. So one of the things with buckets, I don't usually dump the food directly in here. We do have some food that's been stored that way, but I found that over time, it works much better if you have a Mylar bag liner. You can use the big 5-gallon liner and put it in here. That's one of the things it was intended to do. But another thing that you can do is put it in all these little containers. This happens to be a diabetic bucket kit that I'm working on for my little daughter-in-law who's diabetic. And if something really bad happens, she can only have protein if she can't have her insulin, right? Well, and then she needs some rescue carbs. But I'll have this video out in just a little bit. But this is one of the things that I think is great about the bucket is I can put a whole bunch of different things. It doesn't just have to be, you know, 25 or 35 pounds of one kind of food. I can put a whole bunch of different foods in here and seal up the same bucket and then use it like that. And that's the basics of food storage. That's all you really need to know. The most important thing is that you store food. Only store the food that you are going to eat. I think it's a great idea to store dry beans and lentils and other legumes because they're inexpensive, they're nutritious, and they can be delicious. But if you don't eat those, you shouldn't be storing them. A full pantry that is stocked with the foods that your family loves to eat will provide incredible peace and food security. So no matter what's going on in this crazy world, you're not worried where your next meal is coming from. And personally, I think that's really important. Stock up just a little bit every week, and you'll be amazed how quickly you have a 2-week supply, and then a 4-week supply, and then a 3-month supply. And before you know it, you will have a year's supply, and you will be saving so much money because you'll be able to shop all of the sales or the discounts and stock up when prices are low, and then you'll never have to worry about paying full price for food. Thank you so much for joining me today. And now for our question of the day. Share exactly the things that you have learned after years of storing food or just beginning. What mistakes have you made? And what advice and tips and tricks can you share with our fellow preppers so that no matter what happens, we'll be able to eat? Hey, thanks for being part of the solution.